the Los Angeles Clippers. Patrick Beverley is starting over Reggie Jackson as Ty Lue decides to look at a few different options.
You know, they finally got a few guys back, and they had some depth, and all of a sudden Chris Boucher goes down, and it really put a twist to what the Raptors potentially could have done down the stretch.
They finished second last season. They led in the second round 3-1 to Denver and eventually lost in 7. Backup chop, Gary Trent Jr. Jumper, and it doesn't go. And Jackson with it. Lead pass over to Leonard, guarded by Gary Trent Jr. Spinning. And Kawhi will head back to the free throw line, an 88% free throw shooter. 6 points for Kem Birch. Up top, Gary Trent Jr. in the paint. And the shot doesn't go. Good job by Zubac on the inside.
And work on this roster. And I'm already excited about next season. Hopefully at Scotiabank Arena.
Yes, hopefully here. Trent Jr. with it. Off of the Zubac miss.
Yeah, it's not easy saying here when we're not there.
Right. 7-point lead, and we'll check out.
Man, you saw that last play, just too casual and careless with the ball, and that's been an issue now for the Clippers.
Gary Trent Jr. knocks it down. Batum got a piece of it. Kawhi to Cousins, and Freddie G with the denial.
Yeah, but see, he gets out on Leonard, right? 30, 40 feet away from the basket. He's not afraid to get out there now. He needed some help, right? Where was the help? Well, the biggest question mark.
Yeah, and Serge coming back.
Serge coming back, but Paul George is the one that's got to prove that he can play in the
Gary Trent Jr. the 3 and the foul. So Gary Trent Jr. at the free throw line, and he completes the 4-point play.
Some twists defensively, extending it out a little bit, but just try to get back in this game a little bit before halftime.
And he's pushed out to the foul line by Beverley. Gathers, double, bank shot, good! And Boucher heads to the line.
Dealt with Beverley, and then gets off and plays in the passing lane. And
shot doesn't go. Trent Jr. and the Raptors trail by 8.
Dealt with Beverley, and then gets off and plays in the passing lane. And
shot doesn't go. Trent Jr. and the Raptors trail by 8.
And you still got 23 points out of the bench in that first half.
Gary Trent Jr. with a jumper that doesn't go. Beverley scoops it up along the. That's in replace of Serge Ibaka.
Yeah, and you know, you realize, and you know, Raptors saw this in their championship run. There are times you're playing against a big, and they're going to need that size. So you should be entitled to another challenge and not have to worry about saving one for the end of the game.
Paul George bats it. Paul George bats it. Gary Trent Jr.
Ooh, a little bit of contact
and
there.
No call. Here's Gary Trent Jr. and out of bounds it'll be. That's a tremendous story.
And he appreciated it too. Like I think he really appreciated what I said. It was kind of cool that somebody you look up to or admired as a youngster, because he's taking care of him.
Boucher's got 11 here in the quarter. Gary Trent Jr. to the bucket. Down to 108-93.
You know, it's got to be comforting for Ty Lue knowing that, you know, regardless of what else might be going on with this team, you have Kawhi Leonard, right?
Yep.
He's the guy that you can always count on. Pass the ball.
Terrence Mann's mother, former women's head basketball coach, after playing at Georgetown. And Gary Trent Jr. at the line, and Gary Trent Jr. and the shot off the mark. Harris, drive kick. And Gary Trent Jr. off the mark again.